The hum of Heathrow Terminal 5 is a sound defined by movement, thousands of passengers, endless announcements, and the rhythmic clatter of luggage wheels on polished floors. It is a place where anonymity is the currency of the day. In late 2020, amidst the chaotic ballet of international travel, two women approached the business class check-in desk. They were the picture of composure, maneuvering a staggering 7 large suitcases between them. To the casual observer, they were perhaps fashion buyers or wealthy tourists, heading for a luxury escape in the Emirates. They handed over their passports, collected their boarding passes for Dubai, and watched as the heavy bags disappeared down the conveyor belt. There were no raised eyebrows, no alarms triggered, no frantic searches. The luggage vanished into the system, smooth and silent. Yet, buried beneath carefully folded layers of high-end clothing and innocent toiletries lay a fortune. The contents were not narcotics, nor were they dangerous devices. The bags were packed tight with heavy, vacuum-sealed bricks of currency. Millions in sterling, stripped of its history and ready to vanish. This specific weight, dense and paper-heavy, is something modern security scanners are often not calibrated to flag as a threat to aviation safety. This was not a random act of smuggling. It was a single transaction in what would become one of the most audacious financial transport schemes in British history. Over the course of the operation, a staggering £100 million would flow from the streets of the UK to the high-rises of Dubai, right under the nose of border control. The architect behind this river of invisible money was not a scarred enforcer or a notorious figure from the tabloids. He possessed no criminal record, no reputation for violence, and no flashiness. Abdullah Muhammad Ali bin Bayat Alfalasi was a ghost in the system, a quiet man based in Dubai. He carried a diplomatic surname and a passport that had never known a stamp of suspicion. While the public imagination conjures images of underground bunkers and armed guards, Alfalasi operated like a CEO. He built a logistical empire designed to scour the UK of criminal profits more efficiently than any single individual before him. His operation began with a personal touch. On New Year's Day 2020, Alfalasi tested the route himself, flying from Heathrow with 11 suitcases. On that day, he declared just under £700,000, establishing a pattern of legitimacy. Over 10 subsequent flights, he personally transported nearly £6 million, refining the process until he was ready to scale. The business model was cold and transactional. Cash picked up in the UK, converted into gold or clean assets in Dubai. For his services, he charged the syndicates groups involved in illicit trades a flat 10% fee. To the outside world, this was all above board. He registered a company, Omnivest Gold Trading, providing his couriers with official-looking letters of authority. He booked the flights, secured business-class seats to maximize baggage allowances, and managed the itineraries from thousands of miles away. He was the invisible hand, moving pieces across a chessboard that spanned continents, believing that as long as he remained in Dubai, the long arm of the law could never touch him. For a long time, the system appeared flawless. The couriers followed a precise rhythm: fly into Dubai, check into a luxury resort, hand over the luggage, and return home with a tan and a substantial payment. It was a cycle of easy money and minimal questions. Alfalasi, safe in his distant headquarters, relied on this repetition. But repetition breeds complacency. And in the world of high-stakes smuggling, complacency is the precursor to a downfall. On the fourth run for one specific courier, the invisible shield finally shattered. The date was October 3, 2020, a day that would mark the beginning of the end for the enterprise. Tara Hanlon, a recruitment manager from Leeds who looked nothing like a hardened criminal, pushed a trolley stacked with 5 enormous suitcases into Heathrow Terminal 5. She was accompanied by another woman, Megan Reeves. To the check-in staff, they presented the perfect image of two friends heading off for a girls' trip to Dubai, a few days of shopping and relaxation in the sun. The story was plausible, but the physical reality of their luggage told a different tale. The suitcases weighed in at a collective mass of over 60 kilograms, a burden that seemed excessive, even for the most fashion-conscious traveler. Inside the bags, the contents had been packed with military precision. Bricks of sterling notes were vacuum-sealed into tight blocks, then meticulously wrapped in layers of ground coffee. This was not a culinary choice. It was a deliberate countermeasure, designed to confuse the olfactory senses of detection canines. On top of the cash, Clothes were layered to provide a visual alibi, while air fresheners were stuffed into the lining to further mask the scent of the money. Externally, the bags looked mundane. However, Border Force officers had already flagged the anomaly. As Hanlon navigated the terminal, a detection dog locked onto the trail. The silent alarm had been tripped. Hanlon was steered into a side room, the air thick with sudden tension. When questioned, she stuck to the script. She claimed the bags contained only clothing and expressed ignorance about what her companion might have packed, insisting she was simply eager for a holiday break. But as officers unzipped the cases, the sheer scale of the deception spilled out. Stacked inside was £1.9 million in cash. The holiday facade evaporated instantly. The physical seizure was significant, but the digital evidence found on Hanlon's phone proved far more devastating for the network. When investigators accessed her device, they did not just find a confused tourist. They found a professional logbook. There were extensive message chains with a woman named Michelle Clark, the recruiter. The phone held detailed instructions on when to check in, scripts on how to behave, and evidence of 3 previous journeys that summer, where Hanlon had successfully transported over £3.5 million. Most damning of all was a text sent just days prior, where Hanlon asked Clark for more names, stating she needed 12 more people who were fit, can't talk and reliable. Her arrest did more than stop one courier. It provided the authorities with the first loose thread in a tapestry that spanned continents. The silence was broken, and the investigation turned its eyes toward the woman giving the orders. Tara Hanlon's seized device was a Pandora's box, and once opened, the digital breadcrumbs led investigators away from the baggage carousel and straight to the woman pulling the strings from the dessert. The data pointed to one individual, Michelle Clark. Clark was not a bag carrier. She did not risk her freedom walking through customs with illicit cargo. She was the conductor of this silent orchestra, a former executive assistant for Sky TV in Leeds. She had relocated to Dubai with her husband and children, presenting the image of a successful expat family enjoying a fresh start. But beneath the veneer of a sun-soaked life in the Emirates, she was constructing an intricate logistical machine. Police analysis of the seized messages revealed that Clark was the central node, linked to nearly every key courier in the operation. She was the bridge between Alfalasi's capital and the mules on the ground. To maintain absolute control, she established a communication protocol that was equal parts amateur and military grade. At the heart of this digital command center was a group chat with a name so innocuous it bordered on satire, Sunshine and Lollipops. The title suggested playdates and picnics, but the reality was one of the most disciplined smuggling networks UK authorities had ever encountered. Admission to Sunshine and Lollipops was by invitation only. Clark personally vetted and onboarded every member. Once a courier was accepted into the fold, the casual facade dropped, replaced by rigid operational security. Instructions were not suggestions. They were absolute commands. Communication was strictly confined to encrypted channels. To further insulate the network, runners were instructed to purchase burner phones, pay-as-you-go devices bought with cash used for a single specific journey, and then wiped or destroyed immediately upon return. Silence was the rule. Between jobs, the couriers waited in a digital void until Clark reached out to activate them again. The logistics were handled with corporate efficiency. Clark managed the bookings, utilizing Abdullah Alfalasi's credit card to purchase Emirates business class tickets. This was not for comfort. It was a tactical decision to secure the generous baggage allowance of up to 4 large suitcases per passenger. When the couriers landed in Dubai, the handover was choreographed to the minute. They would exit the airport, check into a designated resort, and surrender the bags to waiting handlers. The transaction was swift and sterile. Most couriers never saw the cash again once it left their possession. They would enjoy a night or two of luxury, then fly home, their role complete. As the operation proved successful, the network began to expand organically. It operated almost like a multi-level marketing scheme, but for high-risk transport. The strict rule of do not ask, do not tell remained, but the human element began to introduce variables. Some couriers, emboldened by the easy paydays, started recruiting their own circles, bringing in friends, partners and relatives they felt they could trust. This referral system allowed the network to scale rapidly, but it also introduced a fragility. The more people involved, the more the secret spread, transforming a tight-knit cell into a sprawling web that was becoming increasingly difficult to keep in the shadows. The brilliance of Alfalasi's scheme lay not just in the logistics but in the casting. When we imagine members of an international organized crime syndicate, we tend to picture hardened individuals with records, tattoos, and a history of violence. The couriers in this network were the antithesis of that stereotype. They were influencers, ex-models, corporate professionals, and recruitment consultants. People who could walk through a crowded airport terminal and blend seamlessly into the background of middle-class respectability. This camouflage was the operation's greatest asset. Most of these individuals were approached directly by Michelle Clark, or brought in through the trusted referral chains. The pitch was seductive in its simplicity. A few days in Dubai, a luxury hotel stay and a payment of several £1,000s. The job? Just carry some suitcases. No drugs, no weapons, no obvious danger. Just bags of cash, accompanied by a company letter that ostensibly legitimized the whole affair. For many, struggling with debt or simply lured by the glamour, it seemed like a victimless shortcut to financial relief. Take Jo Emma Lavin, for instance. A former model, known publicly for her past relationship with boxing legend Joe Calzaghe, she was the very image of the operation's veneer. Clark met her in Knightsbridge, offering £3,000 for a single trip. Lavin accepted, and the allure of the job was strong enough that she eventually brought in her partner, Jonathan Johnson. Johnson, who worked in executive recruitment, was not blind to the risks. He sent texts before a flight, remarking that the luggage looked ridiculous, a clear sign of his internal unease. Yet, he boarded the plane anyway, helping Lavin transport nearly £3 million across 2 trips. The normalization of the abnormal had set in. The roster of unlikely mules continued with Amy Harrison, a quiet woman from Surrey with a low profile. Described by those who knew her as reliable, she took 3 trips, eventually graduating to helping with logistics like packing and paperwork. Then there was Beatrice Orty, a 26-year-old from Fulham with a background in media. Initially hesitant, she was soothed by Clark's reassurances and the official-looking stamped certificates. Her involvement deepened until she was organizing arrangements for other couriers, facilitating 16 trips alongside her own journeys. Even older, less digitally visible individuals were recruited. Nicola Essen, 56 from Leeds, was brought in through offline contacts. She flew business class, a respectable traveller in her 50s, carrying a staggering 19 suitcases across 3 journeys. Nearly £6.5 million passed through her hands, from Mohammed Ilyas, who kept to himself on solo flights, to Megan Reeves, who joined through Hanlon to escape drowning debt. The motivations were diverse, but the outcome was the same. Stacey Borg moved in silence, while 25-year-old Paige Henry was trusted with over £8 million across 4 trips. They all shared a dangerous suspension of disbelief. They told themselves it was a grey area, or legitimate business, or simply that they would get in, get out, and never be caught. They were ordinary people, weaponized by their own normalcy, unaware that their invisible status was rapidly expiring. To move over £100 million in physical currency requires more than just willing carriers. It demands an industrial-scale processing system. The operation functioned like a shadow logistics firm. The cash, generated from various underground markets and illicit trades across the UK, did not just appear at the airport. It was first funneled into a network of counting houses, rented apartments scattered across London, that served as the engine rooms of the enterprise. These were not smoky backrooms but sterile, functional spaces, void of personal effects. Inside, there were no cameras and no furniture, only tables, as in industrial counting machines, precision scales and vacuum sealers. The packing process was a discipline in itself. Workers would sort the sterling into bundles, aiming for a target weight that equated to roughly £500,000 per suitcase. The method was uniform, a layer of clothes and toiletries at the top to satisfy a cursory visual inspection, followed by the payload-dense bricks of notes packed tightly below. To defeat the noses of trained detection dogs, the syndicate utilized a cocktail of scent masking agents. Ground coffee, mouthwash, and scented dryer sheets were liberally applied to confuse the animals. The physical preparation was meticulous, but the true genius of the operation lay in its exploitation of a specific blind spot in modern aviation security. The general public assumes that airport security sees everything. In reality, the systems at Heathrow, specifically the advanced 3D computed tomography court scanners, or designed with a singular overriding purpose: flight safety. The algorithms are trained to detect explosives, weapons, and dense organic materials that could threaten the structural integrity of an aircraft. They hunt for the density of plastic explosives or the silhouette of a gun. Paper money, even in large quantities, does not register as a threat to the plane. It is not combustible in the way a bomb is. Nor is it a projectile, unless a human operator physically intervenes, or the software is specifically toggled for currency, which is rare due to the volume of passengers. The image of a suitcase filled with cash passes through the monitor as safe. The syndicate thrived in this gap between safety and customs enforcement. Under UK law, travellers are legally required to declare cash amounts over £10,000. However, the system largely operates on an honour code. There are no routine outbound customs scans specifically for currency, and once a passenger clears the security checkpoint, they are effectively in a sterile zone where scrutiny drops. Alfalasi's network bet everything on this silence. Once the couriers touched down in Dubai, the game flipped. Here, the paperwork took over. Michelle Clark armed each traveller with a forged authorization letter from Omnivest Gold Trading, stamped and signed on official letterhead. These documents declared that the courier was an authorized agent transporting capital for legitimate business purposes. At Dubai Customs, the couriers would boldly declare the cash. The paperwork matched the cargo. The officials stamped the forms, and the bags were waved through. It was a masterclass in bureaucratic camouflage, using the appearance of strict compliance to mask a massive financial breach. The system worked flawlessly for months, moving millions like clockwork, but the network did not collapse because of a flaw in the scanner or a missing stamp. It collapsed because the human component, the couriers, began to leave a trail that no amount of coffee grounds could hide. Let us return to the moment the silence broke the arrest of Tara Hanlon. While the airport continued its bustling routine, a quiet, methodical investigation was igniting behind the scenes. There were no press conferences, no dramatic public warnings. Instead, the National Crime Agency (NCA) began the painstaking work of forensic accounting and digital reconstruction. They started connecting names, tracing booking references, and pulling data from the seized devices. Each text message, each photo of a boarding pass, and each geolocation tag added another pixel to the image of a vast, invisible web. The first domino was Hanlon, but she was merely the entry point. Once her phone yielded Michelle Clark's name, the NCA had a target. They watched, waited, and followed the trail. The next to fall was Zdenek Kamarit, a Czech national intercepted at Heathrow just weeks later. He was carrying £1.3 million, packed in the exact same manner as Hanlon's cargo, carrying the same forged paperwork from Omnivest Gold Trading. The pattern was undeniable. Then came the sweep. In March 2022, Joe Larvin and Jonathan Johnson were arrested at Manchester Airport. By that time, they had already completed their runs, smuggling nearly £5 million between them in August and September of 2020. Border Force had flagged them months prior, but the NCA had held back, gathering enough evidence to ensure the charges would stick. Amy Harrison, the quiet logistics helper, was caught in the net shortly after. Beatrice Orti, who had felt so secure in her role, had her door kicked in during a series of dawn raids in May 2021. The authorities already possessed a dossier, linking her directly to Clark and Alfalasi. Even the anomalies were tracked down. Mohammed Ilyas had tried to stay low, but fate intervened on one of his trips when a bag went missing in transit. When it eventually turned up at Heathrow, unclaimed and unopened, officials found £431,000 inside. That lost bag was a beacon that led straight to him. Upon his return on a subsequent flight, officers were waiting. One by one, the couriers were picked off. Their arrests unlocked further data. The same flight accounts, the same credit card payments, the same company letterheads. All roads led upward to the apex of the pyramid, Abdullah Alfalasi. But Alfalasi was a ghost in the desert. He remained in Dubai, insulated by distance and a lack of an extradition treaty for this specific crime. For months, his name sat at the top of the case file, untouchable. The NCA had built the perfect trap, but the prey was out of range. Then, in a twist that baffled investigators, Alfalasi walked right into it. In December 2021, Perhaps believing in his own invincibility or unaware of the extent of the surveillance, Alfalasi boarded a flight to London. He traveled with his wife and children for a personal visit, staying at a high-end apartment in Belgravia, owned by his in-laws. He used no aliases, no disguises. It was a fatal miscalculation. The NCA moved in quietly around lunchtime. They seized 3 phones, and with them, the crown jewels of the investigation. Photos of every courier's passport, messages planning every handover, itineraries, and packing lists. The ghost was finally in chains. In the summer of 2022, at Isleworth Crown Court, the story reached its legal conclusion. Alfalasi, the man who thought he could systemize crime like a corporation, pleaded guilty to laundering more than £100 million. The judge sentenced him to 9 years and 7 months in prison. A confiscation order stripped him of £2.5 million in assets, including his luxury vehicles and watches. The couriers faced their own reckonings, prison terms for some, suspended sentences for others, their lives irrevocably marked by their time in the Sunshine and Lollipops network. Michelle Clark remains in the UAE, a fugitive still under investigation. The network was dismantled, proving that while cash may be silent, it always leaves a trail for those patient enough to look.